Good morning. We are here today to discuss Parshiyos Acharei Mos and Kedoshim, and the title for today's class is AI, Demons, and the Pursuit of Non-Intimacy. This month, the month of Iyar classes are sponsored in loving memory of Daniel ben Arya Yaakov Halevi Zichrono Livracha, and for the merit, as a merit, and for the merit of a refuah shalema for Daniel ben Chaya Tessia, Israel ben Chaya, and Chaya Ruth bat Mecha. May K'lal Yisrael experience true Shalom, and may we all merit to see the complete Geula speedily in our days. Now, this is a sponsorship by the Slomiansky family, and God willing, for the next flyer, I will add that in there. We definitely wish a refuah shlema for Daniel ben Chaya Pesya, Israel ben Chaya, and Chaya Ruth bat Mecha, and of course an aliyas neshama for Daniel ben Arya Yaakov Halevi. And may the merit of our learning and all the merits of this tremendous family and all their good deeds bring about these wishes for refuah and aliyas neshama, as well as the tefillah that K'lal Yisrael should experience true shalom, and that we merit to see the complete geula speedily in our days. We don't know what's going to happen, right? Why should it not be the complete geula? In addition, this week's classes are sponsored in honor of Erica and David Prusky, with congratulations on the new addition to the family of a baby girl, Sydney Ava, also known as Shoshana Aviva. Mazal Tov. May the whole family enjoy her with nachas and good health for many decades, and may they also include blessings for the entire family and for all the children and grandchildren to go in the ways of K'lal Yisrael and good deeds and relationship with Hashem. Also would like to add a refuah shalema for Peril Sasha Bas Meril Rivka. As Hashem, she should have a complete refuah as well. Have other things in mind, and I recommend that we all have many other things in mind, because K'lal Yisrael needs our tefillos. So today we are discussing the topics of Parshiyos Acharei Mos Kedoshim, and I'm going to get straight into questions. Like in the title, we talk about AI and demons, and that will be addressed in the course of our answer. So how can we understand the progression of topics in Parshas Acharei Mos? We begin with Yom Kippur services, and then that's a bunch of sentences, and then we mention a prohibition, an injunction against slaughtering offerings and sacrifices, and slaughtering or offering sacrifices outside the sanctuary, plus not slaughtering offerings to demons. Very interesting that we go from Yom Kippur to specifically slaughterings outside and a discussion about offerings to demons. There's a prohibition against eating blood, which is part of that paragraph as well. And then immediately after that, we have the what in fact we read in Yom Kippur afternoon, which is the section that deals with prohibiting us to follow in the ways of secular societies like Egypt and Canaan, and all the laws of illicit relations. So how do we understand the progression of all these topics? Question number two, and it's related to number one, is that here in Parshas Acharei Mos, as I mentioned, we have all the prohibitions of illicit relationships, but in Parshas Kedoshim, at the end of Parshas Kedoshim, we have the punishments of those relationships, and in the middle, we have the rest of the laws of Parshas Kedoshim, which include a wide variety of laws, such as the commandment to pursue holiness, having awe of our parents, numerous interpersonal laws of social justice, like not harboring hatred and loving your friend as yourself, not stealing, not lying, not withholding wages, not putting a stumbling block, the laws of waiting 3 years prior to eating the fruit of a newly planted tree, not oppressing a convert, not using false measurements, and the laws of molech and necromancy. So there's a bunch of laws that separate the prohibitions of the illicit relationships and the punishments of the illicit relationships. Why is all of that in the middle instead of just putting the entire topic of the illicit relationships together? So the first two questions pertain to understanding the organization of the topics in both Parshas Acharei Mos and in Parshas Kedoshim. Question number three, to go into the topic of demons that we mentioned just a moment ago briefly. The Torah, and this is the way most opinions understand this simple sentence reading of this topic, which comes immediately after the Yom Kippur service, the Torah, according to most opinions, explicitly discusses the once common practice of demon service. So what are demons? The Hebrew word, by the way, is se'irim. The Talmud speaks of demons. And what is that all about? It's very interesting that that's a straightforward sentence in the Torah. And why was this a common practice? Sounds weird, to say the least. And why? And by the way, it's referring to the Jewish people apparently having been engaged in that practice. So why was it common? And why is it only discussed here in the context of not slaughtering sanctified offerings or bringing up sanctified offerings outside the sanctuary? Would it not be more appropriate to simply have a paragraph prohibiting demonic practices and services? That just seems to be separate from taking an offering that's supposed to be inside and bringing it outside. Why is that all meshed together? Then question number 4 is, it's really interesting, and this is a common question, but definitely it's our Parsha, good to talk about it. Why on every Yom Kippur afternoon do we read the laws of immoral relationships? The whole Yom Kippur day, we're involved in special service to Hashem. We have the Yom Kippur Musaf service. We have all the major description of the offerings in the holy and confession and everything else. And in the afternoon, we're talking about illicit, immoral relationships. So why is that the way Parshiyos Acharei Mos is organized? And why do we do that every Yom Kippur? So what I'd like to do is immediately dive into our answer. And just as a preface, mention that the commentators basically agree that demons were attractive to people as entities that would either provide information about the future or actually assist them in some capacity, such as becoming messengers to gather or bring something to the humans, provide certain pleasures to them, meaning to those humans who interacted with them. Now, Seforno, we're going to read his commentary in a moment. He does an amazing work in describing the ethereal nature of the composition of demons, and then in explaining that blood is of particular importance to demons, in that the life force that attaches to blood is what demons consume as their sustenance. And my sub-note to that, my footnote to that, is that this is almost certainly the precursor of the whole vampire mythology. Okay, now, of course, demons are an impure force in the world, and they therefore are not only unreliable and unpredictable, they are also damaging. In the words of the rabbis, we refer very often to demons as mazikim, which literally means those that damage. Doesn't only mean little kids that sometimes people cast about, but it actually is the way the rabbis refer to demons. And part of the damage is literal, so to speak, and part of it is that they are an impediment to the pursuit of holiness and a genuine connection to Hashem. Now, my last preface point before we read the Seforno's commentary in detail is that it's also important to note that according to Maimonides, demons have no relevance or impact on practical life nowadays. This is likely because unless we give demons a space and an acknowledgement in our own day-to-day living, they do not interact with us in our human dimension. That's probably the outcome according to Maimonides, and very likely possibly according to other people as well, but that subject is probably up for debate. Now, what I'd like to do is to read to you the Seforno commentary. It's just extremely interesting and good to know that it exists. And remember that he was also a doctor, so he studied science in his day, and it seems that he had a very advanced understanding of psychology and some scientific concepts here. So first of all, the Seforno mentions that one may not sacrifice unto the demons, even though they did not accept them in any way as gods. So part of demonic, so to speak, worship is not worship as a deity, but is as a way of currying favor with them so that they'll do favors to you in kind, right? So even if all a person is doing is seeking the companionship, if you will, the relationship with the demons so that the demons will be their servants and assist them in their affairs or as messengers, right? And the sages make mention of cases like this. You can look at Eruzin 43a. You can look at Chulin 105b. The point is, it's prohibited. However, regarding the demons whose creation is not mentioned in the Torah, says the Seforno, it is proper to study or consider them. Our sages of blessed memory called them mazikin, meaning injurers, damagers, and mentioned that they eat, drink, reproduce, and die. Still in all, demons can see but are not visible, and this cannot be properly understood unless we understand that demons themselves are composed by a very fine substance, which too is invisible. And since they eat and drink, their food perforce must be of a substance composed of something extremely fine, which is assimilated into the organism consuming it, and again, not visible. Now, there are no compositions, this is the Seforno's scientific background, there are no compositions known to us more refined than the vapor of blood from which the spirit which carries the life force exists. That's probably what we call today oxygen. Is oxygen visible? No. Does it exist? Is it a life force? Definitely yes. Is it conveyed to our tissues through blood? The answer is yes. Hence, the attachment of the life force, oxygen, or something spiritual that attaches to blood is very important to demons, because this force being carried is the soul of life through which every creature lives. And since the force cannot be without this carrier, it is sometimes called nefesh. That's why it says this morning we call blood the soul, because the blood has this attachment to the life force. Being that this is the case, therefore blood is the food of demons. Consequently, he who offers them blood, which is their substance and which they need and which they are not for some reason able to take on their own, he will gain the love or the friendship or the companionship of the demon. And also, the human being that eats blood will acquire a temperament which tends towards the nature of the demons who use this blood life force as their food. So since many desired the companionship of demons and their love so that they would assist them in acquiring futile pleasures, which are sweet but without practical benefit, the identical desire which was attained by the eating from the tree of knowledge, so he compares it to the original eating from the tree of knowledge, they would bring blood as an offering to the demons and eat it themselves in order to join together with them. Now, this Seforno does a beautiful job at explaining why the blood prohibition is part of the same topic as the demons' service in the Torah. So when Hashem, blessed be He, sanctified us and distanced His people, the Jewish people, as much as possible from pursuing futile pleasures, He distanced them from the demons and their company, since they are in truth injurers. And it became very dangerous to go with these practices, including the eating of blood, which carries an excision penalty, or slaughtering the offerings outside, which Sforno does not fully explain, which I'm going to get into, also is a very serious sin in the Torah. And the Torah therefore says that misusing blood is almost like murder. And he goes on to say this, that the mist-like substances of blood, which the life force carried in it, and that's why it's called soul, right, is very thin and kind of insubstantial, and therefore we call it the soul. And misusing that is like spilling blood, kind of like murder, in a sense. So anyways, that's most of the commentary of the Seforno, and instead we use blood, and this is the last point he mentions, we use blood and limbs symbolically as our offerings to show that what we're trying to do is give ourselves completely to Hashem. We're not connecting to something which is separate from Hashem, and like the demons, and they're distant, and they have kind of a disconnection. Instead, we're using everything that we are symbolically through the blood and the limbs of the animal to connect to Hashem and bring it inside. So that's the background on demons and the understanding that the Seforno has in order to explain why demons and blood are connected. But what of our question that why are we having this whole discussion in the context of the offerings? So here's what I think we need to understand, and then I'm going to share with you something that I learned from AI about AI. Based on all this, we can understand the following. Intimate relationships are both tremendously fulfilling and at the same time very challenging. In order to truly connect to another human being on a deep level, it is critical that in this relationship, each party comes to know the truth of who the other is, our strengths, our weaknesses, our proficiencies, our deficiencies, and this is obviously not so comfortable. We call that today being vulnerable. In addition, a real person relationship means you necessarily are opening yourself up not only to the other person's scrutiny, but to their opinions. Well, that's really not comfortable. Because of this, many people look for a more illusory and less meaningful or less complex relationship with an entity that does not really probe the truth of who they are at their essence, or does not challenge them to become or think something different from their current selves. That's exactly what a relationship with AI looks like. Whoever you show up as, they just want you to be happy with who you are. And they'll ask you questions only that they think you want to hear and give you answers only that they think you want to hear. That's what a relationship with AI does. Now, in the old days, before artificial intelligence or artificial intelligence entities, this meant that human beings would simply develop less intimate relationships because real intimate relationships are difficult. So people would have superficial relationships. And at times, even just transactional relationships, if you get my drift. People look for that because it's not challenging on any level. Of course, it's not intimacy. And there is a real pursuit of non-intimacy because it allows us to remain as we are and be comfortable and get some degree of pleasure and satisfaction by whatever the other non-intimate party in the relationship is providing, or in the case that we were just discussing, what demons would provide. And there's even an intimate demon that comes at night that has this demonic name Lil, which we're not going to talk about today, but many people are familiar with know what I'm talking about. So people who are pursuing these kinds of relationships enter AI. Because the conversation about AI is not only relevant if you use AI, it's even if you do not. The bottom line with AI is that it programs itself to give you the answers it thinks you want to receive. It does not have a self of its own, and it's only spitting out information that it gathered from other places based on what it thinks you want to hear from the information that it gathered, like the demons who gather stuff and bring it back. In truth, many people do that in their own relationships, meaning their own human relationships. They do not look to truly give of themselves and their points of view. They just look to people to please the other person. And of course, that's a superficial relationship. And of course, many people are not looking to share their real selves. The real challenge in intimacy relationships is to listen deeply to the other and their uniqueness, and to share deeply from the uniqueness of oneself. So here is some disturbing information gathered unironically today using ChatGPT. So here was my question to AI. What percentage of today's population has an emotional attachment or relationship with an AI entity? That was my question. What percentage of people today are using AI to develop intimacy relationships? So here's the short answer, and then I'm going to give you much more information. There isn't one single definitive percentage, but multiple recent studies converge on a range of roughly 15 to 30% of people having some form of emotional or relationship-like attachment to AI, depending on how you define it. So a clearer breakdown is as follows. The general broad attachment romantic interaction, apparently about 28 to 33% of Americans report having had an intimate or romantic relationship with an AI chatbot. Now, this is one of the highest headline figures, and apparently it includes loose definitions of what does it mean, or even a brief experimental interaction. In the second category is emotional use, but not necessarily romantic. About 1 in 3 people, that's 33% in some populations, have used AI for emotional support, companionship, or social interaction. Now we get into teens and younger users. Around 30% of teens actively use AI for social interaction or relationship-like engagement. And so in general, younger generations are showing a higher adoption and emotional openness to these entities. And category number 4, specific AI companion apps. These are heavy users, so within a certain, subset of the population that people use AI all the time, it can be up to 50% reporting some form of romantic relationship. And of course, that is a biased subgroup. So basically, what all this really means is that realistically, there's a strong ongoing emotional attachment, probably closer to 10 to 20% of the population, versus any meaningful emotional engagement interaction or occasional or light is 20 to 35%. And people that have a willingness or an openness to it might be as high or even more than 50%, which is obviously incredibly high. So, bottom line is that this is not a fringe phenomenon anymore. And a reasonable evidence-based summary today would sound something like this. Roughly 1 in 4 people develop some level of emotional attachment to AI systems. And that is scary without all the other fears surrounding AI. And it's not just a random thing. It follows very clear psychological and demographic patterns. And by age group, teens and young adults, meaning ages 13 to 30, about 25 to 40% are showing a likely engagement, some emotional engagement to AI. And apparently that has to do with growing up in the digital age with digital interaction as being normal. And they're more comfortable with the idea of anthropomorphizing technology. And middle-aged adults, age 30 to 55, that's likely closer to 15 to 25%, but mostly using it for advice, stress relief, or problem solving, but less likely to call it a relationship. And that age group tends to be more skeptical and have stronger existing human networks already. And that's a very important point, because if you start with a weaker human network, you're more vulnerable to using AI as an attachment, which is directly our Parsha, because if you start with a true pursuit of relationship with Hashem at the highest level, then you will not be accustomed to going after the demons. And conversely, if you do not start with that, then you'll be more open to going after the demons and then the secular societies and their immoral, transactional, non-intimacy relationships. And that explains part of the progression. And the bottom line is this is a very, very important topic, and it doesn't only pertain to AI. And other very interesting takeaways are that single, divorced, or widowed people are significantly with a higher likelihood, somewhere between 25 to 40%, to attach to AI. Married or strong partnerships is much closer to 10 to 20%, but might still use AI for emotional processing or advice that they don't want to burden their partner with seeking them. And then, of course, higher religious individuals, meaning people that are highly religious, have a much lower likelihood of a romantic style attachment, and they might use it moderately for guidance, reflection, or learning, as we're doing today. We're using it for learning. And we who emphasize human relationships and divine connection, we are very cautious about anything that's not real. Okay, so there's a huge amount to understand on this, but the final insight is that this is about human psychology. AI does not create the need for connection. It amplifies or redirects needs that already exist, because human beings have a craving for connection. So the progression of topics in Acharei Mos is to convey the idea that we go from the greatest intimacy experience possible with the Holy of Holies and the High Priest on Yom Kippur Day, when because of our intimacy we're able to achieve complete atonement and complete purification in connection with Hashem, to understanding how if we don't pursue that, we may get distracted with non-intimacy, demonic-like relationships, which ultimately lead to major disconnect, and when it comes to other human beings, immoral, transactional relationships, and following the ways of decadent and depraved secular societies. So the reason that demons are being discussed in the context of holy offerings is to teach that there is a direct and proportional relationship between the pursuit of non-intimacy relationships versus the pursuit of intimate ones. When a person is properly engaged in the pursuit and achievement of intimacy relationships, they do not seek non-intimacy, demon, transactional, AI relationships. And of course, the reverse is also true. If they're seeking those relationships, they're not going to be seeking real relationships with real people and the real divine, etc. So the Torah is teaching this to us, that indeed by working through the discomfort of building intimacy connections and going all the way to the holy and having the lifeblood of the animal and its parts offered in front of Hashem, symbolically representing how close we want to connect to Hashem, if we do that, it will prevent us from seeking the non-intimacy relationships with humans, demons, or AI. And then, as the Torah outlines, like the societies of Canaan or Egypt that were completely depraved and immoral, that's the normal course of the gravity pull towards non-intimacy relationships. So ultimately, what's real is what's most satisfying and valuable. This is true even if, God forbid, and this is a really important pshat point here in the Chumash, what's real is really most important, even if, God forbid, one experiences tragic loss in these intimacy relationships, as Aharon did. He lost two magnificent sons. The famous expression, is it better to have loved than lost or never to have loved at all? It's definitely better to have loved. What you have is real. And part of having real relationships means that, God forbid, they can be tragically painful when they are lost. So the context of pursuing this intimacy relationship with Hashem that the Torah presents is that even when people experience loss, even in that pursuit, it's just so incredible, with the children of the Kohen Gadol, of Nadav and Avihu, the children of Aharon, Nadav and Avihu, who get lost, it's totally worth it to pursue and to continue to pursue intimacy relationships with Hashem and intimacy relationships with people. Now, very contemporary, I highly recommend a podcast with the mother of Hirsch Goldberg Polin. The mother is Rachel Polin. She's a teacher and she's a very intelligent woman, and she speaks openly about what is grief and about the love relationship with her son. And she talks with tremendous appreciation of the grief and the love and the gift of having had her son for 23 years and 334 days. God willing, the link will be in the transcript, and I recommend that. This is an example of that. Even though it's so painful, it's so worth it. But the illusion is that it's not worth it. So therefore, today, people are not only experiencing relationships that are transactional or not intimate, they're experiencing it with completely false entities like AI and not having children. And in so doing, they are anesthetizing themselves from any pain and preventing themselves from any real fulfillment and achievement of intimacy and that which is real in their lives. So on Yom Kippur, we contrast the ultimate intimacy relationship with Hashem and the non-intimacy pursuits of the depraved and immoral societies to which we can fall victim. And it's very important to note that we can fall victim, because unless we are in the pursuit of the utmost intimacy relationship with Hashem and people, we will likely fall victim to the depraved societies and their false pursuits, such as AI relationships. As insane as that sounds, I began, this whole topic with introducing what the statistics seem to be, and that it's a real tragic phenomenon that is becoming more popular. So here we have to ask ourselves, okay, so look, we have the secular society around us. Everybody's using AI. You do a Google search, you're using AI. AI is just, the internet on steroids. And it's a fabulous tool, and it's a fabulous distraction, and it can be completely illusory to the point where people become worshiping of it, not unlike demonic worship. What we need to understand is what is the antidote to that. And I believe that the intervening Parshas Kedoshim, meaning the section that separates the prohibitions of the immoral relationships with the punishments of the immoral relationships, that's the answer. What's the answer? The answer is creating a society where people truly care about the pursuit of that which is selfless, otherwise known as holy, and that which is real, such as love your neighbor like yourself. And for the first time, I can tell you I had an insight into that sentence that I never had before. And it's not only that you need to measure what real love is by what you want to have done to you and distance what you don't want to have done to you from doing that to other people, but it's actually you need both. In order to have a real relationship with yourself, you need to be having real relationships with other human beings. Otherwise, you're just going to live in a false reality, like the people who develop relationships with AI. And of course, that famous sentence is here in Parshas Kedoshim. So therefore, the topics of having true awe for your parents, recognizing the reality of human relationships and what we owe to our parents and what we owe to Hashem, who is interested in our existence and really cares about us and really always acts selflessly towards us. And having true appreciation for that, that's the beginning. That's the building blocks of real intimacy relationships, which is why, of course, the healthier a person's relationship is with their parents will be the healthier the relationship is with their spouses and their own children. So when a person is properly engaged in real relationships with other people, and then you have a whole society that protects that in the form of loving your neighbor like yourself, don't take revenge, don't withhold wages, don't steal, and so many laws that are mentioned here in the beginning of Parshas Kedoshim, we're not going to want the fake stuff. I mean, most of us, thank God, are in the position on this class where we think about having a relationship with AI and we think, what, are people insane? It reminds me of the article I read about 15 years ago that a woman married her chandelier. It's as insane as that. It's literally as insane as that. Just got a little more bells and whistles. So for some people, it seems harder for them to discern. So Parshas Kedoshim intervenes the prohibitions of these immoral relationships and their punishments in order to teach us the antidote to the pursuit of non-intimacy relationships. The best formula to help our nation refrain from following the pursuits of depraved secular societies is to establish a society of selflessness and true connection and support where the citizens respect and value each human being in their communities. That becomes a safety net for all members of that community, which means we should be thinking about what about those of us in our communities that need a shidduch, that need a job, that are just sitting at home, that are not getting out of themselves, that are not developing relationships with other human beings. That's why social working is the basis of trying to help people get a healthier psyche, a healthier psychological outlook, and all of that can be greatly enhanced when we develop societies that are truly built on real relationships with one another. So holiness does not only mean sanctity and removed from that which is impure, it means the ability to connect to the other and the ability to really experience the other. It's true both of Hashem and both of relationships with human beings. It's why, for example, the rabbis teach us that ever since the destruction of the temple, the real pleasure of the truest physical intimacy relationships is not the same. The rabbis also teach us the Nachmanides wrote a book on the laws of physical intimacy between husband and wife, and it's called Da'as HaKedosha, the holy mind, or the holy mindfulness, if you will, right? The ability to really experience the other is dependent on selflessness, and that's where true pleasure and intimacy and fulfillment is experienced. But when we fall victim to retreating into ourselves and to being not vulnerable and to not wanting scrutiny and to not wanting to share our real selves and to not wanting to really listen to the other, then we are certainly prone to illusory relationships, transactional relationships, and even worse, completely false relationships such as AI. I think I'll do questions and comments now because, as I mentioned just before we started, I need to run a little bit early today. So let's do any questions and comments, and hopefully there will be a transcript with further elaboration. Ari Marinelli, really interesting point. Whether one accepts Maimonides' denial of the existence of demons or not, one thing is for sure that interacting with them is imaginative. That's what Ari said. Ari, you should look up the Rambam in the Moreh Nevuchim, 3-46, where he tells us what the belief in these demons were. So that's that's in line with that. And then Yisrael is saying it's funny that other religions seem to believe that detachment from human relationships is the way to attach to God. It would seem the opposite is true. That's 100% the case, Rabbi Phil, and it's a very astute and important point. Yes, they struggle with how having a relationship with the divine combines with having real relationships, at least in spousal relationships with other human beings. And that is a stumbling block, no doubt. Jessica, question. Your hand is raised. You're on mute. Are you able to go off mute, Jessica?
Sorry, I couldn't figure out how to unmute.
No
Okay, good morning, Rabbi, and to everyone.
It's a good thing I recognize your voice, otherwise I might think you're AI.
Yeah, no, not AI, but it was a great share. I don't know if you'll be able to answer this question, but today, that is, maybe another time. But in regards to, I understand how intimacy and how something fake versus real, and how there's so much to do with a transactional relationship. How would you apply that to modern day shidduchim today between these families, and how the resume has to be pulled up, and how does that fall into that? Because there's the level of intimacy there is
Can you start that question again, please?
Okay. So today's class is very good. It talks about that part. Okay, so the question is with modern day shidduchim, right?
Okay.
So how does that not appear from an outsider's perspective, right, as a transactional situation? Or where is the intimacy there? They're meeting just a few times. There's a resume involved. How does that apply with intimacy and understanding the difference between fake versus real relationship?
Yeah, so you are asking a very important question, and it's multi-layered. So I'll give you some of the basics, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done in the shidduchim world, no doubt. The first thing is that the advantage of the shidduch world is that if the information is real, and if is one of the biggest words in the English language, in case you don't know, but if the information is real, then you're hopefully dealing with a context to a relationship that is values-based rather than just simply physical attraction-based, which is much less real than values-based. But again, it has to be that the information is real, and that's one of the major advantages. Now, the more that information is known and extended to the family in general of the girl or of the boy, that's certainly enhanced and that's certainly beneficial. The problem is that in today's world, since so many people are used to thinking superficially, we tend to go with labels, we tend to go with pat definitions of who people are or what they do or what clothing they wear or what school they went to or what you should blah, blah, blah. And that's not real. That's true. Is there some benefit to it? It's definitely probably better than shooting in the dark completely and not knowing anything of the background. That's true, but it's far from ideal. Now, because of that, I always caution the boys in the yeshiva to not be doing 4 or 5 dates and getting engaged and married. I'm much more a fan of a proponent of at least 3 months getting to know each other, and there's a lot more that goes into that. And then, of course, you get into what is the relationship that can be created in 3 months, but it's certainly a lot better than the relationship that can be created in 3 days or 3 weeks. And how do you cultivate a real relationship? How do you get to know the real other person? That's why we do something called shidduch chaburos in the yeshiva, which I still do on a regular basis. I just did one yesterday. And so it has to be about getting to know the real person, which of course is predicated on your ability to know yourself for real. But you are right at the beginning of your question. It's not so much that I can't answer that question today is challenging in terms of time, but it does deserve its own full series, actually, and which is really what I do with the Yeshiva Bachrim. But that, to put it in a nutshell, is what it is, and I'll tell you the best synopsis. The best synopsis is that the best shidduch proposal is by a person who knows both the boy and the girl and the families truly very well. It's just really hard to find that.
Yeah,
but that's
very.
why that is the best shidduch suggestion.
Okay. And the class that you do is only for the bachars, right? You don't do it like for...
I actually have done it for gatherings of single girls at people's homes. If somebody wants to put one together, I'll be happy to do it. I have done that, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay. Have a great day, everyone. Is there a class from Abba? Yes. Okay. My mother's saying yes. Class for my father. Please zoom on over in about 15 minutes. Have a super day, everyone.
Somebody post the link for that
Thank you so
for your
much.
father.